Welcome to our YouTube channel, Movement Matters. In today's episode, we're going to be discussing about the hip. In the previous episode, we were discussing about the ranges of motion that the hip is allowed to perform, and any restriction in those ranges of motion will lead to a dysfunctional hip. In this episode, we're going to be talking about some of those stretches. You'll see a figure 4 glute stretch that Marie-Joelle is doing here, and she's also stretching her piriformis, or safe to say, pretty much all 6 of her external rotators of her hip. In this next episode, she's going to be doing a 90-90 hip stretch, where it's typically almost like a yoga pigeon stretch, except the back leg is not outstretched behind her. The front leg is at 90 degrees, the back leg is at 90 degrees. And whilst you see her walking around, the location of the stretch will actually change depending on the position that she's in. The closer she comes to the middle of her body, the harder it becomes. The more she goes towards the outside, the more of a stretch she gets on that hip. It's a nifty little way of actually producing a little bit more stretch out of that muscle. If you've got the flexibility for it and you'd like to get a little bit more of a low back involvement, what you can do is actually crouch down on all fours and try and go a little bit further to stretch your hip and your lower back, flexibility permitting. Now the inner thigh. Okay, so now Marie-Joelle is showing you a basic stretch going in and out her thigh. The key thing here with this exercise is to make sure that your lower back doesn't round out. If you keep your bum out and your low back arched, you will get a better stretch through the adductor. In this one here, Marie-Joelle is showing you the hip flexor stretch, which is typically what's done to help stretch the anterior portion of the thigh. By reaching up and above, she actually gets a side flexion component because, believe it or not, the hip flexors on that side do side flex the body. To add a little bit more spice to this exercise, we're getting this exercise done in a little bit more of a 3-dimensional fashion. So she's going at a 45-degree angle, then a 90-degree angle to target all 3 dimensions of the hip for this hip flexor and the inner thigh muscles. Lastly, simply, you can grab a yoga strap, a towel, a belt, anything that doesn't really have elasticity, something that doesn't give, wrapping it around the ankle and just actually practicing a little bit basically some hamstring stretches and a little bit of a calf stretch as well. When as we mentioned before, the hip is a 3-dimensional structure, so you'll notice Marie-Joelle is actually rocking her leg inside and outside, trying to find those spots in the hamstring that have a little bit more stickiness. If you can identify those parts, you will get a better stretch throughout the exercise. We hope this video sheds some light on some easy stretches that you've seen and done before. Give us a call, 514-556-4994.